Welcome to Political Paradigm. Senior Advocate of Nigeria, Falana, is my guest. Mr. Falana, welcome to Political Paradigm.
Thank you very much. It's my pleasure.
So we hear that we are an evolving democracy, and you've lived through dispensations. You've seen the military era, you've seen the civilian era since 1999. Are we truly evolving, and at what pace is this?
It's difficult to say that Nigeria is an evolving democracy. I would rather prefer to say that ours is an evolving civil rule. Because there is a word of difference between a civilian dispensation and a democratic system of government. Whereas in the last 24 years, or thereabout, 23 years, we have had uninterrupted civil rule. But we're far from democratic rule. Democracy, as stipulated by the Constitution, Section 14 of the Constitution, requires that we promote popular democracy in Nigeria. It is also stated that the government of Nigeria shall not be governed by any set of people outside the democratic process. In other words, you must have credible, fair, and free elections. And we haven't really been having elections, good elections in Nigeria. Two, it is also stipulated that the security and welfare of the people shall be the primary purpose of government. Again, the welfare of our people has never been of interest to the members of the ruling class. Of course, insecurity has become the order of the day. So, you therefore cannot talk of genuine democracy. Of course, human rights are violated with impunity. Instead of rule of law, we have rule of rulers. And these are a sine qua non. If you are talking of democracy, that you must have the rule of law firmly in place. The human rights of the people must be respected. You must have good elections. And of course, the socio-economic rights of the people must be addressed. In other words, the welfare of the people and their security. And when we are talking of security, we're not talking about physical security alone. Not about having enough adequate number of policemen and women, security gadgets. We're also talking of human security. And once these essential attributes of democracy are missing, yes, you can talk of civil rule because we chase the military out of power, right? But the civilian wing of the ruling class is hardly better. So, and that is why we must continue to struggle towards the transformation of civil rule to democratic rule.
You know, they say that there is no perfect democracy anywhere in the world.
For sure.
So if you look at Nigeria's democracy, specifically in the past 23 years since we returned to civilian rule, what progress would you say has been made?
Apart from the fact that we have kept the military out of power, I'm not quite sure we have recorded any progress. On the contrary, the limited gains that have been recorded have been eroded. You have incessant arrest and illegal detention of innocent people. I'm battling with a number of cases where soldiers, military officers, abduct or arrest civilians who are not subject to service law, and they just simply keep them in their barracks. the law stipulates that once a month, a chief magistrate shall visit all police stations in his or her magisterial district, while a high court judge shall visit other detention facilities in the country. The provisions of these laws are not observed. So our people are being harassed. I'm talking of the poor. The rich can take care of themselves. They can hire the best lawyers in town to challenge any violation of their rights. But for the ordinary people, it is difficult to talk of freedom in Nigeria today. Majority of our people are denied freedom without any basis. Young people are criminalized on the highway, they're stopped by security forces and harassed. Whereas those who import bad fuel or foul fuel, those who loot the treasury to the tune of billions, those who engage in extrajudicial killings are hardly arrested and prosecuted by the system. So whereas ordinary people accused of stealing handsets worth about 10,000 or 20,000 naira are arrested and detained when they are going to be taken to court, if they are lucky to be taken to court. They are handcuffed and chained, paraded before the media. But nobody ever talks of parading a former governor accused of stealing billions, or what they call money laundering. Or you don't embarrass politically exposed persons out of sheer class solidarity. So in that kind of environment, it is difficult to speak about democracy for the majority of our people.
Is it a system that's designed by default? Or is there a problem? Is there something that went wrong somewhere that could be responsible for this anomaly that you just pointed out?
You see, in 1999, when civil rule was restored, successive regimes in the country have never sat down to demilitarize the psyche of our armed forces, security forces, including the police. So you have men and women in the forces terrorizing our people because they think it's normal to harass the poor, intimidate people, subject them to torture, contrary to our human rights obligations as a nation, contrary to the provisions of Chapter 4 of the Constitution and the provisions of the African Charter on Human and People's Rights. So no regime has ever undertaken to respect the rights of our people at the federal, state, or local government levels. There's no example of good governance when it comes to respecting the rights of our people.
It would seem that there's some level of awareness among the people, especially the young ones, and getting into the conversation of politics. You will find religious leaders even getting involved now at this point. I'm curious, do you feel that this awareness that we find, or do you even find this awareness now? Do you think it will have an impact, especially looking ahead of 2023?
You see, no doubt, millions of young people are reported to have registered to vote. More are prepared to participate in the democratic process. But it's not enough to vote. What are you voting for? And this is where the media, the press, has to help the Nigerian people. It is no longer sufficient to talk about big names. Former this, former that, contesting elections. Or one of them, or some of them say, oh, we are going to spend money. I'm going to show that I'm richer than another candidate or another aspirant. You guys in the media must help. What are your solutions? What are your suggestions? Concrete suggestions towards addressing insecurity of life and property in the country, addressing mass unemployment of young people, able-bodied people in our country, fixing of roads, addressing infrastructural decay in the country. How are you going to restore the lost glory of our country in the Committee of Nations? And unless you begin to interrogate politicians, nothing will change in 2023. Because our people must be encouraged, must be mobilized to choose well. But if it's about religion, if it's about where you come from, if it's about zoning, we're not going to get it right. We must now, as a people, after 60 years of independence, we must challenge those who have made it impossible for our country to realize our potentials. We all say all the time, oh, Nigeria is a potentially great country. When are we going to realize the potentiality? And so those who want to govern us must be challenged. What will be the relationship between Nigeria and the Bretton Woods institutions, the IMF and the World Bank? How will you fix the exchange rate of the Naira vis-a-vis other currencies? How are we going to address productivity? Without asking these questions, our people are not going to be encouraged to choose.
Mr. Falana, I fear that the conversation that you want to be told or to be had is quite easy to have among people who are exposed to certain infrastructure, who have access to television, who have access to radio, who have access to us, the media. The determinant factor in most elections that we've held in this country has been the people at the grassroots, the people in the rural areas who don't have access to these infrastructure that we talk about, access to information. How will they be influenced to make this decision?
Please, I beg you. We must not insult our people. Up to the Second Republic in this country, elections were issue-based. The 1993 presidential election was issue-based. In fact, the late M.K. Abiola, who won that election, campaigned on the basis of ending poverty and creating wealth for the country. In fact, what he called farewell to poverty. A political party like PRP or the UPN in the Second Republic address issue of education, access to health, rural development, agriculture, and the rest of them. Today, people still talk of Jakonde housing estate. But since then, the governments in Lagos State, all the governments in Lagos State, since 1999, have been building houses for the rich, and not for the poor, and not for the workers. So in this country, elections were about access to education, or in the western part of the country, what you call free education, access to free education. Right? And when you are talking of the rural people, it is so bad now that they talk of the past, even the colonial era, with nostalgic feelings, which is very sad, you know. So they know what they want.
Mr. Falana, when you talk about the quality of government that's expected of a candidate, it may be too early to call, but then we've had declarations of interests for presidential seats. When you look at the crop of people who have come forward now to say that they would like to run for office, do you see that kind of leader among them?
No. No. And you see, this is where the media again comes in. It is the fundamental right of anybody, any citizen, to aspire to contest election. I want to be the president of Nigeria, you know. I mean, it's my right to dream, to want to aspire to the highest office in the land. But the media must challenge me. What have you done to merit this dream of yours? How do you want to address the problems confronting the country, right? And I'm talking of all those who have come out to say they want to rule the country. And it's not at the federal level alone. At the state level, even local government levels, we must begin to ask people, why do you want to serve? Or why do you want to rule? Which is what currently goes on. So we must therefore go out of our way to encourage those who are ready to serve the country. The best for candidates in an election are at the end of the campaign, but they must have gone through, you know, stages of, you know, queries. You must be able to say, this is the position of this candidate on taxation, on revenue generation. You don't wait until the debates. When somebody can tell you, well, I'm not going to take part in a debate, and nothing will happen. Since 1999, how many presidential candidates have taken part in debates?
Mr. Falana, let me take you back to your conversation on zoning. It would seem that you are not satisfied with the conversations that have made the rounds on zoning, despite the fact that certain sections of the country feel it's their turn to rule, or they deserve to rule. You don't seem to think that zoning makes any sense. Some have called it an unconstitutional nullity. Is that what you see as well?
No. The Constitution recognizes zoning. The Federal Character Commission Act recognizes zoning. In fact, by the provisions of Section 4 of the Federal Character Act, if there are two positions in Nigeria, it's said there, one shall go to the north, one shall go to the south. If there are four
political positions?
Oh yes. Must
elective
be two.
positions?
Oh yes. If there are 6, one per geopolitical zone. And Section 14, subsection 3 of the Constitution provides that the government of Nigeria shall not be constituted in such a manner as to give the impression that only a section of the country,
that's just the composition of government. We're talking of the elective position.
Yeah, elective position. It's stated there. It's in the Constitution.
How do we
Even
reflect
the question of amenities?
How do we reflect
amenities shall not be considered in any part of the country to the exclusion of other areas.
Mr. Falana, how do we reflect federal character in this case with regard to the office of the president?
You see, apart from the office of the president, right, we must also talk of equity with respect of other positions. But the point I'm making, once you elevate religion, zoning, sectional interests, over and above the problems of poverty confronting the majority of our people. You are going to be playing the game of the elite. Members of the elite, the political elite, regardless of wherever they come from, insist on zoning, right? Not on behalf of the people, but to satisfy their own immediate political ambition. No more. It's not about, I mean, how many of the people talking about, oh, it is a turn of the South to rule the country? How many of them have said, if we are going to be given the opportunity to rule the country, these are the issues we are going to address. So please, don't talk of zoning in the air. It's not the turn of anybody to rule any country. No. But you see, in the constitution of the political parties, in the constitution of Nigeria, in the Federal Character Commission Act, I am saying zoning is recognized and positions are zoned. Again, it's not just about North-South alone. Right? What the constitution is talking about is that every citizen must have a sense of belonging. And so when you are talking of federal character, it's not about North-South divide alone. We're also talking of women. We are talking of young people. We are talking of physically challenged people. So that everybody is represented in government. So when you are talking of, oh, the turn of the North or the South, what turn? Do you understand me? So I'm saying, yes, whoever says, oh, zoning is unconstitutional, it's not talking law. I mean, it is in your constitution. And those who are talking are products of zoning. They themselves are products of zoning. But once I simply say, oh, we have a press conference, now is the turn of the South. The North has been in power for the past 16 or how many years? Now it's our turn. For goodness sake, you are not advancing the cause of democracy.
Mr. Falana, it's about a year now before the general elections. And for those who've talked about a third force, for those who've said the APC, the PDP, the big parties with the structures can go, there's no conversation of a third force now. There are no tracks as to who is going to make up this third force. Is that a concern for you as well?
No, it is not a concern, because I'm aware that there are committed political forces that are working towards having a political party that can challenge the dominance of the APC and the PDP. These two parties have been in power for 23 years. And there is no hope that our country is going to come out of the woods. And so there is a general concern by a number of democratic forces, committed individuals, well-organized groups that have begun serious consultation with a view to launching a political party that will challenge the status quo.
Professor Pato told me hints that you are part of that conversation. Is it true?
I am involved at the level of the People's Alternative Political Movement. And if you will recall, many of us were in the forefront of the struggle against demilitarization of our country. The struggle against unending military rule. We have now discovered that our country is going under. Our region is in trouble. As of today, about 3 governments have collapsed in West Africa, and more may go. And so we have a duty to mobilize genuine political forces, not just in Nigeria, in other parts of Africa, to appreciate that we are back to the 80s and 90s in terms of going back to the barricades to defend the democratic rights of our people.
You know, the argument for many Nigerians would be whether or not we're ready for that kind of politics. I mean, comparing a lesser party which will evolve
why don't you wait?
I'm going somewhere with this. Comparing a lesser party to parties like with the APC and the PDP, who have massive structures. Well, then the question would be that ahead of the 2023 elections, what do you see happening differently?
As regards to the ongoing consultation, and I can tell you, led by the labor movement and its allies, the 2023 race is not likely to be business as usual. There's nobody who is going to contest any serious position that will not be challenged.
At all levels?
Oh yes, oh yes. Young people are asking questions, particularly after the NSAS protest. Young people have shown more interest in the political development of Nigeria than ever before. And many of those young people are going to contest elections. And I can tell you the conversation we are having transcends 2023 elections. It is about the daily struggle of our people against illegal arrest and detention, against extrajudicial killings, against the dollarization of the economy, against poverty in the country. And so that is not a 2023 affair. I mean, agenda alone. I was in a meeting this afternoon with a friend of mine, a professor from Ghana. And we're discussing the return of military dictators, in West Africa. And we both agree, and we have to reorganize civil society organizations to go beyond issuing annual reports and the rest of them. Go out there to ensure that we fight authoritarian regimes that are giving room for military coups, that are promoting military coups, that are inviting military dictators to take over the political, structure. So it's not just about accusing soldiers of taking advantage of each of our countries. It is about fighting ECOWAS leaders that are manipulating the constitution of their countries to pave way for third terms. It is about challenging African leaders that are organizing bad elections. And it is about challenging the violations of the human rights of our people. And unless you remove such violations, there's no way you are going to stop military rule. I mean, ECOWAS can simply not say, we are suspending military dictators, military juntas. It's not enough. You must not allow civilian presidents to manipulate the national constitutions. You must not monitor illegal elections conducted by them. And if people in West Africa can see an ECOWAS that is prepared to defend democracy, an ECOWAS that is prepared to defend the economies of each of our countries, it will be difficult for military dictators to seize power. But once elections are rigged, constitutions are manipulated, opposition figures are killed or detained, the adventurers in military uniform will always want to take advantage.
Let's talk about the elections, the Electoral Act Amendment Bill now. Are you worried, like many, that weeks after, the president is yet to sign the Electoral Act Amendment Bill?
I'm not worried. I understand why the ruling party is not prepared to reform the electoral process through the new bill. And I won't be surprised if the president doesn't sign the bill. There were all the excuses. Been in this game since 2018. Whereas the APC, as an opposition political party, was campaigning for electoral reforms. Right? The party is not prepared to allow the status quo to change. Status quo that promotes rigging of elections, violent elections, inconclusive elections, and the tribunalization of the electoral process. I'm talking of, asking courts or tribunals to determine the winners of election as opposed to the people. So, the ruling party wants the situation to remain. Hence, there is no prayer on the president to sign the electoral bill into law.
So the cliche question would be, what next? I mean, the National Assembly had attempted to, or given it a thought, to override the president.
No, it's a challenge. It's a challenge to all Nigerians. Once the 30-day period expires, the bill goes back to the National Assembly, and Nigerians have to mount prayer on the National Assembly
to override the
veto of the president. Yeah, we can't go on like this.
I spoke with the governor of Bauchi State, Bala Mohammed, on a provision in that Electoral Act Amendment Bill which raised the election spending for the office of the president from 1 billion to 5 billion. So he believes that spending 5 billion for an election is relatively small. Do you agree with that?
Again, I can understand why the governor has to think that way, or why the National Assembly people believe that they need to fix 5 billion naira in a country where the minimum wage of 30,000 naira has not been paid in the majority of the states. It is worrisome that members of the ruling class simply want to monetize the politics of the country. And that's what is going on. What they spend on the presidency, on the presidential election, is beyond that. Oh yes. But the law requires INEC to monitor the spending. That is never done. So, they are going to spend much more than that. Again, this is where Nigerians have to be vigilant. How many Nigerians can afford 5 billion naira to contest election? How? But a lot of the money right, will be taken from the public treasury. That you must know. And that is why we must find out the source of the campaign funding of every candidate, of every political party.
Mr. Falana, let's leave politics and talk about some other issues now. I don't know if you've seen the statement from the Minister of Information in relation to the Canada truckers' protests, where he compared that to the NSAS protests, trying to justify why accounts were frozen. What did you make of that statement?
The Canadian government has not sent out troops to fire and kill protesters. It's number one. Number two, the passports of the protesters have not been taken by the government. Three, the Canadian government has not recruited thugs, armed thugs, to unleash violence on protesters. Unlike here. And one will expect the government to learn not to expose its own hypocrisy. The president of Nigeria said publicly that the NSAS protesters wanted to remove him from office. The Canadian government has never said that. Canadian government has never accused the protesters of treason. Their accounts have not been frozen.
I understand that some of their accounts have been frozen. For the GoFundMe account has actually been frozen.
You see, again, you can be sure that will be taken up. Because that's a violation of the rights of the protesters. And you must appreciate that authoritarian rule is not limited to this environment. Right? Some of the ongoing violations, whether in Africa or in Europe or America or Canada, are a reflection of the contradictions in the capitalist system. But for the fact that America has developed institutions, the attempted coup of President Trump on the 6th of January 2020 will have succeeded. Oh yes. So if after 200 years of independence, a president could stage a coup in America, you will agree with me that the struggle for democracy and political stability and rule of law and human rights has not been settled by any country. Yes.
Let's bring that into the Nigerian.
But the difference between the ongoing protests in Canada and the NSAS protests is very clear.
Let's bring your statement on the institutions in the United States institutions, bring that into the Nigerian context now, and question why we have strong individuals and weak institutions and how we can rectify that.
We have to fight official impunity in order to allow good governance, in order to prevent disruption of the affairs of the state. Only 74 people in Nigeria are entitled to immunity while they are in office. 74. The president, the vice president, the 36 state governors, and their deputies. Outside those 74 public officers, no other person in Nigeria is entitled to immunity. But because we're operating in an environment where in place of the rule of law, we have the rule of rulers. immunity is conferred on many people. That is what we call impunity. So once you have impunity, institutions are collapsed. And so if you want to build strong democratic institutions, you must fight impunity. You must ensure that every criminal suspect is brought to book. It was the late Lord Denning, a top British judge, that once said, no matter how high you are in the United Kingdom, the law is higher than you. In a neo-colonial environment like Nigeria, no matter how high the law is, members of the ruling class are higher than the law. And that is the difference. So, we can only engage in the struggle, to build democratic institutions. As I did say at the initial stage, currently we have civil rule as opposed to democracy. So it is a process, it's a struggle that we have to wage.
All right, as a senior advocate of Nigeria, let me get your thoughts on the recent development involving suspended DCP Abba Kyari. Like many Nigerians, do you smell foul play?
No! In fact, that thought, please, and we must also be fair to ourselves. There's no conspiracy here. There's no conspiracy theory here. It's just a question of coincidence. Here is a gentleman who has been made to believe that is above the law in the country. That is untouchable. That is untouchable. And therefore can get engaged in any criminal offense. That's what happened. Because here is a suspended police officer who was called by his boys. Can we make some fast money from this criminal enterprise? And he fell for it. There's no country that would get an officer involved in drug trafficking. To make what point? To prevent his being taken to America? No. No. Because we must also show that we're a sovereign state that can punish those who commit offenses here. And the request for extradition is not granted as a matter of course. There are situations where a country can say, sorry, under our law, under the Extradition Act, there are exceptions. For instance, if there's evidence that somebody is going to be sentenced to death in a foreign country, you may have a second thought. If there's evidence that is going to be subjected to torture, you may say, sorry, we're not going to allow extradition. If there are enough, if there is political will here to try him, you can tell the United States government, the crime originated here, right? We're going to have this guy tried in Nigeria. So it's not automatic that you throw everybody. I can understand the frustration of Nigerians in wanting those who appear to be above the law to be outsourced, to be taken out of Nigeria for trial. But we must recognize all the time that we are a sovereign nation, and we must ensure that the law enforcement agencies in our country do their work and stop embarrassing us.
Let's talk about the recent off-spec PMS issue now. I'm sure you followed that conversation. You've also heard the NNPC managing director apologize, the CEO of the NNPC apologize as well. I'd like to get your general thoughts on this. And most importantly, if you're satisfied with the actions of the government so far since this came to fore, has the government handled this well? And are you worried that no one's been directly held responsible for it yet?
The government hasn't taken any action, none. And this is it's terrible that impunity is being institutionalized in our country. Anybody can do anything. The last time we had this incidence of bad fuel was in 1995 or thereabout, under the late, under the Sonny Abacha junta. Now that it has reared its ugly head, whether the government likes it or not, those who are involved are going to be exposed. And there will be increasing demand for their prosecution. And we also encourage Nigerians whose vehicles have been damaged by the fuel, right, to contact lawyers so that they can file actions in court on the part of the federal government through the NNPC. Those companies that are involved will have to be brought to book. Because it's not just a case of obtaining money by false pretenses. It's a case of selling bad fuel in a fraudulent manner to the country. But from the information that are already in the public domain, the NNPC is complicit. The president is the Minister of Petroleum Resources. And the minister hasn't said anything on this unfortunate development. We expect the EFCC and the ICPC to have stepped into the matter. Arrest those who have engaged in this unwholesome development, very criminal development. Have them tried so that I can serve as a deterrent to other business people that may want to take Nigeria for a ride. Our country has become a dumping ground for expired drugs, expired fuel. And that is why we must not allow this matter to go unchallenged.
Mr. Falana, you've been a human rights advocate for virtually all your life. In assessing the progress we've made in the fight against human rights abuse, if you look at the administrations from 1999 till now, in your assessment, how would you rate these administrations to ascertain if we've made any progress so far in the fight against or curbing human rights abuse so far? Right from the Obasanjo administration till since 1999.
No, no regime can be said to have promoted the human rights of our people. In fact, with each regime, the situation is getting worse by the day. I can tell you that. In spite of the fact that we have one of the best human rights law regimes in the world, in terms of the rights that are guaranteed on paper. I'm serious about it. But it has been difficult to get a government in our country, right, that will ensure that the rights that have been guaranteed by the Constitution and relevant international human rights instruments are respected. The situation is worse today than ever before. Since 1999, people are abducted in their homes and detained in some underground cells by the State Security Service without powers to do that. There's no law that allows the State Security Service to arrest anybody on the street and detain him. There's no such law. I've said it repeatedly. I've not been shown the law. The police, of course, can make arrests. But you have no right to detain people without taking them to court. There's no provision for killing suspects in custody In fact, under the Anti-Torture Act, the torture, inflicting of torture on a citizen in Nigeria attracts 25 years imprisonment. If the victim dies, the torturer will be charged with murder and prosecuted for murder. But what happens every day? Illegal arrest, illegal detention, sometimes illegal killing in custody, and nobody is brought to book. Hence, we have unending human rights abuse. So it's difficult to really draw a line of dichotomy, between one government and the other, because the political will to ensure that the rights of our people are respected. It's never been mustered by any.
I think that's going to be a concern for Nigerians generally, because we've gone from one political party to another and not seen any improvement.
No, they are the same. The APC and PDP. There's no difference. In the Second Republic, you could predict where the UPN and the PRP, what item they will vote for in the National Assembly, or what the MPN, MPP and another political party, the party of Alhaji Waziri Ibrahim, what they will vote for, GMPP. Today, the APC and the PDP will vote for the same issues in the National Assembly. So there's no difference. So the fact that you have had PDP in power for 16 years, APC in power for almost 8 years, nothing has changed in terms of improving the human rights standards in the country, in terms of ensuring that the rights of our people are respected. There's no difference.
What do you see the president leaving behind as a legacy? So far, I mean, it's a final lap. Well, he's been there 7 years now. What do you see as a legacy that he will leave behind? Or is there none?
Legacy of poverty, of insecurity, of unemployment, of human rights abuse. Of bad elections. These are the legacies that the regime will leave behind. It's very clear because you have almost a year to go. So I can't see any change.
Senior Advocate of Nigeria, Femi Falana, it's always a pleasure speaking with you. Thank you very much for coming to Political Paradigm. Well, that's Political Paradigm today. Thanks for your time. I'm Terry Ikumi. Goodbye.